Welcome to another lecture of CA Final Indirect Taxation GST lecture series. In today's lecture, we will read about chapter 10 of CA Final PDF, which basically deals with accounts and records and e-way bill. The learning outcomes of this chapter are 1. Enumerate the accounts and other records required to be maintained under GST. So what are the accounts and other records that needs to be maintained under GST by a registered person? Then the additional records required to be maintained by agent, manufacturer and service providers. Then describe the account and records to be maintained by person executing in work contracts, clearing and forwarding agents. So the different types of accounts that works contract, clearing and forwarding agents need to maintain. Then the accounts and records maintained by owner, operator or warehouse, godowns and transporters. Then the period for which these records need to be maintained. Then the provisions related to e-way bill. So mainly the first outcome is the different types of records that has to be maintained under GST. Then other records which agent, manufacturer and service provider will maintain. Similarly, those records which works contract, service, clearing and forwarding agents they maintain, and the records or accounts which the warehouse, godown, owner or operator and transporter maintain, and for what is the time duration for which those accounts need to be maintained. And lastly, about the e-way bill. Okay, now coming to the chapter. So, assessment in GST is mainly focused on self-assessment by the taxpayer themselves. GST is mainly based on self-assessment. The crux of GST is in self-assessment, remember, by the taxpayer. Sorry. Every taxpayer is required to self-assess the taxes payable and furnish a return for each tax period, for that is the period for which return is required to be filled. The compliance verification is done by the department through scrutiny of return and or investigation. What happened? Yes. Through documentary checks rather than physical control. Remember, what department does is they will not go, they will opt for documentary checks rather than physical control. So GST by in its principle is basically has a restriction or sort of demotivate for opting for physical controls. It is mainly based on, it's a self-assessed taxation system. Therefore the department or the scrutiny of returns that are also dependent on documentary checks rather than actually going into the business premise and inspecting the business premise. And therefore this requires the certain obligations to be cast on taxpayer. So if I am self-assessing, I must be having certain books and accounts so that the assessment could be done in its entirety. Such accounts and records may be used by the department. So when a compliance, so when the department will look into compliance and all, then those accounts and records need to be verified. There is something wrong with this highlighter in Copilot, because as and when I'm trying to do it, it actually either leaves few things or highlight everything. Every registered person shall keep and maintain all records at his principal place of business. This is important, okay? I don't understand what's happening. Responsibility has been casted on the owner or operator of warehouse or godown or any other place used for storage of goods, and on every transporter to maintain specified records even if they are not registered under GST. So, and on every transporter to maintain specified records even if, so these some, even if they are not registered under GST, still they need to maintain such some specified records when the person is the owner or operator of warehouse or godown or any other place used for storage. So if I own a warehouse, if there is a godown or there is something called a stock place to keep stock, then I need to maintain books and accounts. Certain specified records need to be maintained even though I am not registered under GST. Similarly, every transporter, it writes every transporter, okay? So every transporter needs to maintain, every transporter needs to maintain specified records. Further, commissioner is empowered to notify a class of taxable person to maintain additional accounts. Commissioner can further notify a class of taxable person who will maintain certain accounts or documents. Similarly, commissioner can also permit a class of taxable person, if that class of taxable person is not in a position to keep and maintain accounts, so can permit a class of taxable person to maintain accounts in such manner as may be prescribed if that class of taxable person is not in a position to keep and maintain accounts in accordance with it. So commissioner has certain power. Okay, what kind of power? So it can notify a class of taxable person who are otherwise not required to maintain accounts, certain specified accounts, so can notify a certain taxable a class of taxable person to maintain additional accounts or documents, and can also prescribe the manner in which those accounts can be or should be maintained. So commissioner has a lot of discretionary power in this regard. It is not mandatory to maintain the account in electronic form. Accounts and records may be maintained either electronically or manually. So there is no restriction that you need to maintain it electronic form. There is no accounts. Further, there is no format also. So if the person is giving a balance sheet, it is not required that it should always have these entries. There is no any standard prescribed format. Now let's go to different sections wherein we get to know that chapter 8 deals with accounts and records. Okay, section 35 and 36 of the act. Chapter 7 accounts and records. Chapter 7 accounts and records, rule 56 and 58 of the CGST rules 2017. So chapter 7 rule 56, rule 58. enumerates the accounts and records required to be maintained by a taxpayer and the period for which such accounts and records are required to be preserved. Further, e-way bill provisions are discussed in this chapter in section 68, read with rule 138, 138A, B, C, D, and E, all in chapter number 6 of the Act. State GST law also prescribe identical provisions in relation to accounts and records. Provisions relating to accounts and records, e-way bill under CGST Act have also been made applicable to IGST Act, vide section 20 of the IGST Act. But before proceeding to understand the accounts and records provisions, let us first go through few relevant definition. Again, the same definition over here. What is a taxable turnover? What is a place of supply? What is a common portal? Common portal everybody knows. Who is a commissioner? Who is an agent? Who is a manufacturer? What is the place of business? Taxable. So certain, what is voucher? Okay, let's not get into it. We will come back to it. Then there is certain statutory provisions which actually talks about what the act says about these classes, but actually we are going to discuss this only, so later on we will discuss. We will just glass through these once, but not now. So let us come to analysis. Okay, yeah. The provision relating to accounts and records required to be maintained under GST are contained in section 35 and 36, read along with chapter 7, accounts and records of CGST rules 2017. So chapter 8 of Act and chapter 7 of rules. Remember, it's 7 of rules. Chapter 8 of Act and chapter 7 of rules. Okay. All right. Yes. Relevant provisions of CGST rules 2017 have been incorporated at relevant places. The first question that anyone asks now, if we are talking or discussing about GST and especially about returns, records and accounts, then the first question comes to our mind that who will maintain records. So the first question on who. So the author writes that every registered person to maintain books of account at his principal place of business, hereinafter referred as PPOB, and books of account relating to additional place of business, APOB, where more than one place of business is specified in a certificate of registration, accounts relating to each business place shall be kept at such place of business. So it must be at his or her principal place of business. Okay, the next question is, where more than one place of business is, then again it would be of, if they are in the more than one place of business, then accounts relating to each place of business shall be kept at that place only. Supply of goods through an auction like tea, rubber, coffee. In terms of above provision, the books of accounts relating to each and every place of business are required to be maintained in that place itself. However, in cases where goods like tea, rubber, coffee, etc. are supplied through an auction, the difficulties were being faced by the principal and auctioneer in maintaining books of accounts at each and every APOB related to stock of said goods. Consequently, it has been clarified that in such cases, principal and the auctioneer may declare the warehouse where such goods are stored as their APOB. The buyer is also required to disclose such warehouse as his APOB if he wants to store the goods purchased through auction in such warehouses. For the purpose of supply of tea through private treaty, the principal of auctioneer may also comply with the said provisions. Okay, we are taking a small break of 15 minutes and then we will resume our class. Thank you.